Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Tuesday, November 15th, 2016 meeting of the Urban Village Development Commission. Welcome back, everybody. I think it's been a few months since we've seen each other. I'd like to go ahead and call the meeting to order and start by asking if everyone had a chance to take a look at the meeting minutes from July 19th, and if you had any questions, comments, or concerns before we make a motion on it.
Nothing for me.
No? Okay. So I'd like to see if there's a motion to approve the minutes. Yes? Okay. And a second?
Second.
Yep.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, passed unanimously. All good. All right, and we're going to go ahead and move straight into our agenda items. And Lucy, are you starting us off, or is Mike starting us off?
I'm doing the really exciting part.
All right.
Good evening, Lucy Sloman, Land Development Manager. Welcome back after your hiatus. We're going to have a couple of weeks of meetings, or a couple of sessions of meetings. Oops, that's not the part.
You're looking for the quasi-judicial piece?
There.
There it is.
That's okay. So, tonight is a public hearing on Central Park. That means it's a quasi-judicial matter. So we're going to go through a couple slides talking about what that means and having you answer some questions. When it's quasi-judicial, that means you function like a court. The proceedings have to be both fair and appear fair. To do that, there are two pieces. We do procedural due process and substantive due process. Procedural due process, as the name would indicate, means the process has to follow certain requirements, such as notice, and that all of our conversations take place in a public setting on the record. Substantive due process means that primarily that we use adopted regulations as the basis for our decision. So if the commissioners could review the following questions, then I'll ask you whether your answers are yes or no. How many commissioners would answer no to all the questions? Any commissioners answer yes to some of the questions? Jeff?
I own property in the Issaquah Highlands. I think that's the only one that I would answer yes to.
Okay, Scott?
Property owner within the Issaquah Highlands.
Okay. The second piece has to do with ex parte contacts. That, as I mentioned, all conversations have to be on the record and in the public forum. And so the question is, have any commissioners had ex parte communication associated with this permit? Okay. And then the audience has an opportunity to challenge any of the commissioners. Okay. Now we're back to that
Right.
slide.
Thank you, Lucy. All right, we're going to go ahead and move on to the Central Park Site Development Permit Amendment, Phase 2. Mike.
Good evening. My name is Mike Martin. I am an associate planner with the Development Services Department, and I'm the project planner for the Site Development Permit Amendment, and I'll get into that in a moment. One point of order on the agenda, item B under number 3 is being postponed to December 6th, so we'll just have the one item tonight. So I always like to start with just kind of a aerial site plan to get everyone oriented with the project site. I'm sure you're all aware of Issaquah Highlands Central Park, which is outlined in the red area. I'm not going to spend too much time on that. So starting with a little bit of housekeeping, this is a site development permit amendment. The original site development permit was approved in 2003, SDP 03001IH, and this is an amendment to that permit to review the Phase 2 improvements. Under that permit, there were some improvements for certain paths within the park that hadn't been planned out yet, and this is the permit that will bring all that to a close. That's not the right word, but it'll pull it all together so that we have programming for the park in terms of a land use permit. So Central Park has 4 paths, and This list here is a little bit of what's going to happen at each pad. I'll keep it brief. We have Jennifer Fink here tonight with the Parks Department, who will walk through a lot of the programmatic elements that are proposed. But what is happening is right now, everything that we're reviewing tonight is what I've deemed phase 2 improvements. Parks Department has a plan to implement a portion of that. So we could call that phase 2B or whatever we want to call it, but I just want to make that distinction that everything you're viewing tonight is within the purview of the permit, and then Parks will additionally discuss things that will happen now versus things that will happen later. So now that I've thoroughly confused you, let me just walk through a little bit of what the proposal is. So we have 4 pads, and I'm going to jump forward here. For context, you can see where the pads are. Pad 4 is up where College Drive enters Park Drive or Central Park Lane. Pad 1 is across the lane where there's existing baseball kind of grass fields, baseball soccer fields. Pad 2 includes baseball fields, softball fields. The pond down there per se is part of Pad 2, as well as some tennis courts. Pad 3 is the low pad to the southwest that has 2 all-weather soccer fields, and there's parking interspersed throughout. I've got some tighter blow-ups to try to define those a little better, and we can revisit those if we need. So rather than work through this list, here's the site plan. And actually, I'll jump ahead and I'll address the site plan in terms of each pad. So anything that you see in gray exists already, and I recognize that that does not read well on this image. But if you go to your packet for the commissioners, it's Exhibit 8. It clearly shows what is existing and what is proposed. And I'll try to highlight it with the cursor. So for Pad 1, the primary proposal is to convert 2 existing grass fields into all-weather fields with lighting and some associated improvements, including a small viewing plaza down here. There's also a picnic shelter proposed, as well as expansion of an existing parking lot from 43 to 100 stalls. Pad 2 is pretty much built out for the most part, but they are showing a picnic shelter and a play area with some bike racks. Minimal improvements on Pad 2. Pad 3 is the same. It has the all-weather field. They're proposing a viewing mound, a storage building, another play area, kind of smaller improvements. They also show a future potential parking area. There's no plan to build that out in the immediate future. That would be, if that was to ever be built out, that would be in response to demand, and that would happen probably years from now. A future bike park is also shown. And then Pad 4, aside from the conversion of the all-weather, the grass fields to all-weather in Pad 1, the biggest amount of improvements occur in Pad 4. And if you're aware of it now, it's just a graded out, it's a flat pad. There's nothing going on there. But the proposal shows 44 parking stalls in support of a more open concept, a passive concept. So where Central Park has a lot of activities in terms of play fields, this would provide a different, more passive user experience. Some of the improvements, and these are conceptual, shows an amphitheater, artwork. I think there's artwork included in all of the pads. Lots of trails in here, drinking fountain, a restroom. You'll also see an 8,000 square foot community building. For a park of this size, and it's just shy of 50 acres, it makes sense that there's opportunities for all-weather use or uses throughout the year. At this time, the Parks Department doesn't have a plan to build this, but we showed it on the plan because we wanted a placeholder for the traffic study so that we could assume the impacts of this through this review. If and when a building was ever put there, that would be vetted through the city council, as would all of the improvements in this park. So this is the first part of a discussion about land use, and we're reviewing a land use permit. But because these are public facilities, there will be additional future public discussion about how monies are allocated and what things are actually put in the park. Two other items that I wanted to touch on. So part of the proposal, and this right here is part of the first phase of development, is to widen the on-street parking on Central Park Lane from 6 to 8 feet. And this really came out of response from public comment, which was heard. This project has had about a year at least of public comment, and I believe Jennifer will talk on all of the pre-existing meetings that occurred prior to this. But one thing that we heard at the public meetings is that this parking on street isn't functioning well because the lanes are tight and the parking is 6 feet wide. This was in the early times of Issaquah Highlands when we were very aggressive with trying to limit the amount of pervious area. And after 12 or 13 years of experience, Parks has proposed and staff supports widening that parking for functionality purposes. It's 2 feet and the travel lanes would remain the same. So that occurs from, well, you can see this section of street right here that's white, indicating that it's up for a new proposal. So it's all that section there adjacent to the Pad 1 fields. Yes,
Just to be clear, you're talking about widening the parking only, but not the street.
correct.
Okay.
And then in terms of traffic improvements or street improvements, the
Mike?
other one, yes,
I think the thing, just to be clear, the curb to curb is going to get wider.
Okay.
But all of that is going
I was
into
going
the
to ask that
parking.
question because that wouldn't solve anything if we just bump the paint out. So I just want to make sure I'm
no,
clear
thank
that we're
you.
adding 2 feet to the
2
to the
feet,
paved area,
yes,
Okay.
2 feet would be added to the west side.
to the west side.
Yep.
Okay.
And then
Thanks.
there would need to be restriping, but.
Okay, thanks.
And then the other street improvements that are proposed, there are two. The first is a traffic signal at Northeast Park Drive, and they're calling this Park Access Drive on this plan. I believe it's called Central Park Lane. A traffic signal there, which we'll talk a little bit more about, and then as well as a traffic circle at this location just to the east of the community building. The condition for that in the SEPA MDNS is that that traffic circle would not be constructed until a building was put in place there, or potentially something else that would cause the traffic to increase so that it warranted that improvement. So I don't think that improvement is imminent at this point. What likely is more imminent, and it's unfunded at this point, would be the traffic signal at Park Drive. And I believe that council is looking at funding the traffic design work for that next year, but that still has to go through the process, so it's still working through the process. So in a nutshell, that's kind of what we're looking at tonight. The Parks Department is asking that we review this in one meeting and reach a decision tonight. This is an amendment to an existing permit, so it's something different than I think has come across this board, at least since I've been here. But with that, I'll turn it over to Jen Fink to take you a little bit deeper into the plans.
Good evening and thank you. Again, my name's Jennifer Fink, Park Planner for the City of Issaquah. Some of my presentation is going to be slightly repetitive of Mike's, but hopefully kind of set it up and frame it a little differently, so please bear with me if some of it's repeat. Central Park was dedicated to the city in 1993 as part of the Montreux project. This is a city park that represents 49.8 acres, or 28% of what is considered the community parks within the city. Central Park is a public amenity providing various sports fields, tennis courts, walking loops, playgrounds, and gathering spaces for the community at large. Central Park and the proposed site development plan before you will serve Issaquah's growing community. Why this project is before you, I'm going to take you back in time a little bit. The Central Park Pad 1 project originated from a council goal to help fund some park improvements. Many projects were gathered. A citizen advisory group was put together at the mayor's request and vetted through a public process a series of projects to be added to the bond issue. Those were vetted through the community and then vetted through the Citizen Advisory Committee, and ultimately City Council did approve the projects that were listed and to go out to vote on the park bond. In November 2013, the park bond passed and received 77% voter approval rating. The park bond was a $10 million park bond, of which Central Park, artificial turf, and lighting received a $1.55 million allocation. And these funding dollars from the park bond were actually used to leverage additional funding for the Pad 1 improvements. And then in 2015, we contracted with Andrews Landscape Architects to help us through the design process. And at administration's request, we gathered another citizen advisory group to help us with the field and Pad 1 design, layout, and functionality for the fields. The Citizen Advisory Committee, in addition to city staff and our design team, had a member at large and other volunteer representatives from Issaquah Football Club, soccer, Issaquah Soccer Club, Issaquah Youth Football, Issaquah Lacrosse Club, Issaquah High School Girls Lacrosse, and Issaquah Little League. We had a series of meetings of both the Citizens Advisory Committees and as we took the Pad 1 design out to the public. So we had a meeting with the Citizen Advisory Committee. We went out to the public to hear response. We held 2 more Citizen Advisory Committee meetings and took a further design out to the public. And then we had 2 more public designs, and by January, the concept before you was pretty well put together at about 50% design. One thing I must tell you that as we went through the first public meeting and our second public meeting, there was much discussion held outside of the field and the pad at which we were originally going out to the public about. So the public really did inform the Central Park design and also informed the update to the site development plan. Here's kind of the design that came to after our series of Citizen Advisory Committee and public input meetings. We've got 2 multi-use turf fields that are all weather that will allow for year-round play. We've got a rain garden, which will house all the storm drain from the property. We've got a walking path, some of which is currently existing, going around the building. As Mike mentioned, we'll have bleachers. We have a community gathering space. The road widening will only take part for the extra parking. That was one of the very large and loud public comments we heard throughout the process. So we'd be widening only in the areas in which there is currently on-street parking. The existing picnic shelter would stay, as would the playground. They did propose, because the picnic shelter is so heavily used, to add another one, as well as the parking lot. The community requested that there be more parking and everyone be able to be close to the fields due to the increase in use that the conversion from grass field to an artificial turf field would generate. So during our 2 public meetings we held during the design of just the Pad 1 process, we received public comments regarding parking, the width of the Central Park lane along that on-street parking area, field lighting, additional picnic shelter, the loss of grass space, and the bike park. And all of those have been addressed in the site development plan and the field lighting more in depth in the Pad 1 construction plans. So once we, as I said, the community input just for the Pad 1 design generated so much additional input and thought that as we, with the morning of the loss of a grass area, we looked at how to what we could do within the site in the master plan itself to address that concern. So we went through a series, staff and our design team sat down and came up with a concept to vet with the public for the Pad 4 design. So while we were generating that, we simultaneously took the park board, the Pad 1 design concept, and we had the Pad 1 design concept approved while we were on the side taking a look at the site development plan as a whole. So the park board approved the Pad 1 design in March of 2016, and then in both April and May, we discussed the site development plan and the Pad 4 concept, only to come back and hold another public meeting up in Issaquah Highlands in June to further discuss the site development plan updates, which included the Pad 4 concept and the results of the traffic study that was conducted. The park board meeting in June, the park board approved the site development plan that is before you. And also in July, we went to the Arts Commission. 0.5% of all city projects need to go to art, and they were enthused about this project and hope to help support art within the park in various methods, and those are identified throughout the site development plan. So as Mike mentioned, oh, that doesn't come out, does it? The gray, I'm so sorry. As Mike said, it's Exhibit 8, but much of the plan is existing already, and in some of the areas, there are minor updates. For Pad 1, as Mike mentioned, some of the pathway is existing already along some of the sides. We would be adding a mound here for some seating, which allows, this mound also serves as somewhat twofold. It helps us remove some of the fencing along this area to allow some openness between the playground area and the kind of community gathering space, but also provides some seating, but also some opportunity for some art and some play as far as a hill and gathering space. We've got a walking path that you could walk all the way around, similarly to what is occurring on Pad 3. The rain garden would house all the stormwater for the pad, the artificial turf fields. We also have a very neat little plaza designed here, which is plaza/dugout. Here's the additional picnic shelter, and then the expansion of the parking lot. One of the things we heard as well is many people are dropping their kids off in areas that aren't really a designated drop-off zone. So with this design and through the traffic study, we first aligned the intersection here to be a little more functional with the College Drive. Currently, it's over to the side. And we also provided interior drop-off space to keep everyone safe. We'd also include some pathway lighting as well to help with the evening hour transitions. Some of the parking lot would receive lighting. However, relative to the BPA positionings, we wouldn't be able to fully light some of the parking area due to restrictions. There would be field lighting associated with the artificial turf fields. Recommendation is for them to be LED, highly functional, to limit the spill and glare from those. Pad 2, really the only major additions here would be eventually parking lot lighting. This is a very dark area of the park right now, that has not been a funded improvement. We'd also add a play area as well as an additional picnic shelter for use. Over at Pad 3, these are the existing artificial turf fields. These were built in 2010 was the grand opening of those. We have some improvements over in that area that still have not been funded, and those include a storage area for some of the field use needs and maintenance, as well as a proposed mound for sitting and viewing and playing, some artwork, and again, a play area with drinking fountains and such. The bike park, that has been from the old site development plan, that is a continued use, just a new location. And the proposed parking to be able to, in the future, maybe support that function. Pad 4, this really addresses the community's concern. This concept was vetted, again, through a series of community meetings and park board meetings to provide an open, more passive space for the community to enjoy the park. It's away from all the active use areas, so if you want to come have a little quiet setting, this is where you'd come. We'd have parking that would serve this area, as well as some restrooms and a picnic shelter. This is a naturally wooded area, and with the proximity to the school, thought it might be housed. It's somewhat carved out now as kind of an interior amphitheater, but could serve as a learning center or a day camp, somewhat of a use in that space. Again, with some artwork thrown in as well, but there's some beautiful views from this with, again, some mounding to help incorporate, perhaps performances or future programming of sorts. Again, another picnic shelter here, and there's already some trails that exist out there, so it would be providing further connection and walking loops throughout the park. Again, the community building with a park of this size, future potential use for interior activities, nothing designed or programmed at this time. And any of these concepts, like the Pad 4 design or the community building, would go through a public process as we get into the detailed design, much like we did with the Pad 1. Once we had the idea, we took it to the public to get further information and design guidance. So here's the site development plan before you. Ooh, that really didn't, I'm sorry, that didn't transfer well. But if you have any questions tonight, along with myself, I have our Parks and Recreation Director, Jeff Watling, as well as our designer, Dave Andrews from Andrews Landscape Architects, and Chris Vogt from Stantec Lighting to address any further questions you may have. So thank you very much for this opportunity.
Thank you. I'm sure we'll have lots of questions. Can we go ahead and go into deliberation, or not deliberation, discussion at this point? Or do you have anything else to present? No? Okay. So, I know I have a bunch of questions.
Me too.
Oh, we'll start with the public, sorry. It's been so long, I'm losing my edge. And also this 3B threw me off too, sorry. All right, so at this time, we're gonna open up for public comment. If anybody would like to speak, go ahead and do so at this time. We'd like to have you put your name on the sheet out there. And if you do stand up to the mic over there, speak into the mic, give us your name and your address, please. And if you could limit your comments to 2 minutes or so, that would be great. Anybody like to speak at this time? Connie.
Well, I got my own. I figure, I don't know. My
Let's
name's
let's put the map up if you can, Mike, if you don't mind. If
I'm
you're
gonna be
referring to
using-
something, it'd be great.
that one.
I'll put
Just to
up
see it,
aerials
thanks.
since That's not reading, but at least we'll have something to look at.
Did you say 3 minutes?
Well, I said roughly. When have you ever listened to me before?
I can go to Google if we need to, but I'll put that up for now.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, my name's Connie Marsh. I have a store at 1175 Northwest Gilman Boulevard, Suite B11, at least for a little while longer, and I also live in town. So I'm going to start with a clarification. Half of this is Issaquah Highlands Development Agreement, and part of it is WashDOT Development Agreement. You're actually looking at two different sets of rules. The Mountain Bike Skills Park, WashDOT. Maintenance Yard is also addressed in WashDOT. We also have parkland, I'm going to call it parkland, open space that is in the city, but city property, but in the county that borders the edges of Central Park, and that is not shown anywhere in this, which is part of Central Park because that is where people are going to access the trails. Also not mentioned was the linkage to the county trail, and the trail that was shown along the BPA in the Issaquah Highlands EIS as part of the trails for Issaquah Highlands. So all of these things are unaddressed. In the information provided in the site development permit, they are basically just updating the prior site development permit that is not anything that has to do with WashDOT. So we're missing parts and pieces in the site development permit update. Also not discussed is how we got an 8,000 square foot community center in this plan. I went to several of the Parks Board meetings, and I can tell you that the public input at those meetings was provided, and the response was less than stellar. Very frustrating, actually. So, in reading the transportation study, they talk about parking. And it turns out that, according to the standards, you're 37 parking spots over the standard in that table. So then you look at this park and you say, why are we taking parkland, which is so rare in our town, that is flat and usable, and turning it into parking spaces, especially when we're going over the standard? And then you look at the maintenance yard, and I don't know who has been up there, but the maintenance yard is basically a flat asphalt square. And they are not proposing to use that for parking, even though it is already set up to be parked upon. They are not talking about the use of the elementary school for parking, even though the prior site development permit did talk about the potential use of Grand Ridge Elementary for shared parking. As we go toward more urban and less suburban, you are going to need to share the uses of all of your parking. You can see I'm sort of cranky about the amount of land we're taking from parks and putting into parking. In their parking study, they did not count the parking for pad 3. They did not seem to count the parking up by the tennis courts. And still, they were over the amount of parking necessary for this lot. So I propose in this situation that, that the parking be tossed back and brought forth in another meeting with something more appropriate and more beneficial to multiple uses for park function, because not very many people want to go like play in the parking lot with the empty cars. I'm going to have one other comment on widening the streets. I was there at 9 o'clock in the morning, and at 9 o'clock in the morning, everybody whizzes down from 24th, 25th, and the 30s to get their kids to school, and they're going 35 and 40 miles an hour through the park. And so if you're actually going to widen the paved area for cars to drive through, I think you also need to have a condition that requires traffic calming to be put into place, because the last thing we want is just wider roads for people to go faster through, because the cars aren't actually parked there very much to make the road feel narrow. So I'm going to repeat just a moment. Either condition or bring them back to a different meeting to discuss parking again, and absolutely condition traffic calming along the road as a part of the design. Thank you.
Thank you, Connie. Is there anybody else that would like to speak? Mr. Kapler?
David Kapler, 255 Southeast Andrews Street. Do we have a working pointer for this?
Use the mouse.
There it is, okay.
You just set it down and use it like you would.
Oh, because the map is showing me here. Okay, great. We have competing plannings, interests going on here, and we have property right here that was going to be rural King County when the original master plan for the park was done. Then it was going to be a college campus. We're now told the college campus is not going to be there. They want to sell the property. We thought, oh, the school district needs more schools up in the Highlands. The school will be in here. We could put another elementary school or middle school or something. We're told by people fairly high in the school district that they don't want it as a school. So we have an adjoining use here that we don't know what it's going to be. When this plan was also done, this whole area was King County and was going to be King County Park. That's 40-some acres counting the strip that comes up to here. This is county proper. Now it was county property, and this is all county property in here. This part is actually Grand Ridge Park on this side of the BPA, but this is city property, and the city didn't expect to keep that property, so they did a terrible job on the paved trail in terms of the grades and the sight distances and stuff, 6-inch culverts, things like that. Instead of the bridge over the creek, there was an old log from logging days, 100-year-old logs were laid down there, and they just paved over the top of it because they didn't think they were going to own that property. The county was going to take it. The county said, it's so unsafe, we won't take it. That trail is so bad, we won't take it. It doesn't meet our standards. So the city still has all of this 40-some acres, which needs to be planned out. Going to pads 4 and 5, it's one of the plans for that are the concept overall I like, but I think it's got a long ways to go. And we're fortunately not approving specific things for 4 and 5 tonight, hopefully. The bike park has had $30,000 of funding for 7 or 8 years or more. Community interest was there. Is it still there? If they had the money, they fenced it, nothing's happened. What's going to go on with the bike park? Is that even a viable use anymore for that area? Again, it's not something we're approving here, but it keeps showing up on the plans. But the 43 acres that it's of city property that they got from the county is not shown on any plans. So we got a lot of figuring out to do about adjoining uses and how we're going to figure out the whole park, which is great. Okay, what I can support. The artificial turf for the fields was approved by the voters in 2013. We want to keep credibility with the voters because there's going to be another bond issue down the road. And there's been a lot of support. There's been a lot of direct involvement of the people that know about those kinds of fields, want those fields and all, and that's good. Question, and we have a lighting expert here tonight. The pad 3 lights are kind of screened from the community because of the trees to the east, and it's a lot lower area. A lot of emphasis seems to be talking about nighttime lights, but how big are those lights sticking up in their view shed during the day? Is just, what can we do to minimize the lights, but also so they have the least impact, negative impact on the neighbors at night and have the least impact during the day in their view, because their views from a lot of those homes is really nice. Glad to hear about the drop-off area. If you're at pad 3, it is constant in seeing the people unloading equipment, balls, kids, whatever. It's really important. And having this one isn't as close to the fields, but it looks like it could work. And that's really an important safety feature and convenience feature. And then they're going to have to figure out where they park after they drop their kids off. And one of those places could be the community space there where someday there might be a building, but right now it's completely paved and ready to go. It needs some lines and take down some of the fence. Connie and I kind of disagree a little bit on the width of the road. I do not like to see that road wider because the speed through there is pretty significant. But a 6-foot wide, when my kids were small, the car seats, you could get them in and out. Car seats now, when I take my grandkids places, it takes a long time to get them in and out, and if they're on the driver's side, you're sticking out in the road, and it takes a while. So having a little extra width for that is definitely an important safety feature. At the same time, you're going to increase the speeds on that road, and that needs to be dealt with. And they do whiz through there. There's no doubt about it. It is an alternative roadway and maybe should be paid for by the city public works department because it's wide enough for a road in a park, but it's not a lot more than a road in a park. Thank you.
Thank you, David. Anybody else like to speak tonight? Please make sure, if you could, all to put your name on the list at some point. Thank you. That we'll have record of it.
One of the other slides? Yeah. Okay. Let's see. Oh, we've got the mouse. Just looking at it. That'll work. Okay. Fantastic. Let's see. My name is Lindsay Walsh. I live in the Highlands. Mom of 2 kids. I work up there too. Overall, I love the plan. I think there's a lot to it that's going to be really useful for the community and particularly people in the Highlands. I completely agree with adding to the width of that road. One thing I think we could look at is, because there is kind of a crossover in this area, if you looked at doing that as a raised crosswalk, that could be a good way to slow down traffic as it comes through there. Because then if you have that as a raised area, somebody's not going to be able to pick up as much speed. So that's one thing. The other question I had is, we've got somewhere over here the large electrical tower, and I'm wondering how that works in. I assume all of this parking is planned around it and it's somewhere up here, but you know, that just came to mind as I was looking through all of this. And then, yeah, I think that's pretty much all for me. I think it's a great plan, and I think that we could get a lot of use out of it, so.
Thanks, Lindsay.
Yeah.
Next.
Good. I was waiting for this slide to be up there. My name's Woody Herzog. I'm with Issaquah Girls Lacrosse Club, also known as ISD. Also, I'm with Super Sticks Girls Lacrosse. And I just want to thank you guys for considering this proposal. We are in a very serious field shortage. Recently, I just had to add some practices before a major tournament, girls lacrosse tournament, and ended up begging the city of Bellevue to use a wedge of their field up at Robbinswood. We ended up throwing the ball around in the dark, which is kind of interesting with a hard lacrosse ball. I also want to just say I agree with widening the road. Every time I've gone up there, you know, granted I'm there for sporting events, there's a lot of people up there, and I've seen kids throwing their doors open and a lot of very close calls. I think it's really a safety issue more than anything, and I really think one of the ideas I like in this is the drop-off area. You know, that allows, you know, families that show up walking from maybe a shared parking quite a ways away, they end up hauling all their picnic gear, baby seat strollers, imagine the sporting gear that's involved going up to the field. I agree with the artificial turf. It's a great surface to play on. It reduces injuries significantly. And I'll finish off by saying that I really support adding some more sporting fields and capacity so that we're allowed to have more practices and games, because it keeps the kids out of trouble, which reduces really the burden on the city itself and makes for a better community. All right, thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else like to speak? Yes, sir.
Hi, my name is John Hillock. I'm with Issaquah Youth Football. I'm going to echo a lot of the sentiments that you just heard, obviously. I was actually on the original pre-bond Citizens Advisory Committee, and then I've been on the post-bond Citizens Advisory Committee. I'm also on the Washington State Youth Athletic Facilities Committee. So I've looked at a lot of, I think I went back and I've looked at 63 grant proposals across the state for different youth field projects. And obviously I'm a little biased because I'm Issaquah, but this was by far the most well-planned, well-thought-out project of all 63 I saw in the state. I mean, everything that's gone into it, all the planning, all the feedback from the community, it's just been fantastic. And I tell you, from just my personal selfish perspective of the club that I run, Issaquah Youth Football, we have about 350 kids that were in our club this year. So on a typical night on the turf fields up there that we have up at Central Park 5, which I guess is pad 3, you know, it's not unusual to have 4 football teams on a single soccer field. you're talking about 100 people on a single soccer field that you're cramming in. So capacity is a major, major issue for us, and it's not even, you could say, well, you could go play in the baseball fields, but we run into the light, the darkness issues and everything else, where it just ends up being, we have to cram as many people on turf as we possibly can because we don't have lights that we can use. And on the fields that we do have lights, like Tibbetts, our football players absolutely destroy those fields because you've got 25, 30 kids in cleats that are going at it every single night, and they just tear those fields up in September, October, and they have to shut them down. I'm sure soccer will say the same thing. And my son also plays lacrosse, and he's played soccer and basketball and baseball and everything else. So the traffic issue, I hear the comments about the concern about the widening and how there's not much traffic there at 9 a.m. in the morning. The reality is it's a park facility that peak times is where the issue is, right? The after 5 o'clock, when all the sports teams come rolling in, and you've got parking going all along that street, and you literally cannot get two cars many times to pass each other on that street. You have to do the whole, road from Hana, Hawaii thing, where you kind of sneak off to the side and someone drives up on the curb to get by, and it does become a real safety issue. And it is a major concern, and I understand with the public. The parking piece, again, it's a peak time issue, right? It's an issue of when do we have all the teams there, and when you go there, even like I drove by there tonight, there was soccer's the only one that's up there tonight, but they have 75 players on the field at 6:30 tonight, and there was at least 35 cars in that bottom parking lot. So you can imagine on a nice night when you've got teams practicing on multiple fields and baseball's going on and everything else, it's at full capacity for parking. There's no question about it that it's overflow everywhere. So that's my 2 cents. Thank you for listening. I really appreciate it. And hope we can get this thing going forward.
Thank you. Anyone else like to speak? Yes.
Hi, I'm Ann Taylor, and I live at 1485 24th Avenue Northeast in the Highlands. I want to thank you guys because I went to a couple of public input meetings, and you have included a lot of what we asked for. I like the widening of the road. Sometimes I don't like it in the morning because I drop off my kids and I go that way, and I know people drive too fast. But I drive through there on the way here, and it's completely dark. And I go to football, and it's crazy town with the traffic. So adding the lights here, awesome. That's great. My concern with the whole plan is when will it get done? Like, will we put the turf in and not widen the road? Will we not get pad 4 for 5 years? I know that's not your job, but at some point, like, some of these things have to happen at the same time. And if they don't, having a great idea about putting a play structure on this pad over here, that great plan has been there for 5 or 10 years and never happened. The picture doesn't say everything that's gonna I want to know, like, what's the timeline for all the improvements, not just we have the money to do this part and the rest is in our grand scheme. And then also, as a parent of a Grand Ridge Elementary School student for another 9 months, the idea that was just floated of opening up that, and instead of doing a community building, opening up that blacktop and allowing parking there is the best idea. I'm also the president of the PTSA at Grand Ridge. And safety for our students, crossing the roads, getting up to the park, while cars are driving up College Drive very quickly, is a huge issue. And people parking illegally on College Drive is a huge issue. And if we have 50 more parking spots that they could be in, I'd love it if they walk to, but they're not going to. So instead of having them park illegally, let's make it a temporary parking lot just for a short time at least, or for 20 years.
Thank you. Anybody else like to speak? Yes. Hi, Mary.
My name is Mary Lynch, and I reside at 2690 Northwest Oakcrest Drive, Issaquah. I wrote this to Mike and as part of the CEPA. I really think for this park that we need to have the total plan, to see that, to be able to review it. We need an approximation of cost and how we're going to fund it and schedule. Because I think to do that, then you can have a true traffic study. And I just got a copy of the traffic study today, and I think it's way under for the number of trips and the impact to this area that's going to happen up there. Just like they said, with the 75, if you multiply that 4 to a field, you're talking, looking at the traffic study is way under committed on the amount of traffic impact to that area. And I don't think the citizens around there understand the amount of traffic that this is going to draw to their area. And I don't think the city has done the proper study on the impact to Park and the other roads up into that area. I know they've asked for studying for the traffic light, but I think you need to go out to the rest of the Highlands and look at a true traffic study when you're bringing this many people in from the outside. So I would ask for a better traffic study once you know what the total park is going to look like. Because Issaquah is known to redo and redo and redo intersections, and we waste a lot of money because we haven't looked at the long term. I also thought the Highlands was supposed to be a walking community and bikes, and I don't see that this plan has addressed the connections to this park to make sure that there are safe walking pathways and bike pathways to here, and we should be encouraging everybody possible to walk into the park. And there's going to be, as I said, hopefully in the future, more low-impact play areas that people could walk to versus drive to. I think we also need to start looking at regional buses up into this area. And this is a great chance for on weekends, if you've got a major tournament going on, you've got a regional bus that's looping back and forth for not only the people coming up into this park, but also from other parts of Issaquah. And I think we ought to be looking at that as part of the SEPA and the whole traffic impact. I also would like to see, and haven't mentioned, is how many of these teams are actually outside of Issaquah. This is a city park. They're asking for city funding. And I don't think we do enough, a good enough job of having impact fees and charging other people that use our facilities to pay their fair share. And I would like to see that part of mitigated fees is to mandate that and insist that outside citizens pay for the use of the park here. As far as the traffic through the park, I've also been up there, and there is speeding. Anything that's done should have the speed bumps, traffic calming to slow it down, just so the people, even on off hours, are not zooming through that when people are trying to walk to the different areas. I also haven't seen a very good stormwater, and you're putting a lot of impervious surfaces up here. If you're talking about widening streets, I'd like to know that there is the capacity in the existing stormwater to be able to handle that. If you're talking at an 8,000 or a 4,000 foot community center, that needs to be studied. I would, and support Connie's and the others, is you ought to be looking at sharing parking. Because right now, I've been at the budget hearings, and they're talking about even to start funding on this, they're going to rob the rest of us in the city of our park mitigation fees. So that I, who live over on Newport Way, there's supposed to be a park or land that's donated, but there's nothing in the future now for us to be able to build parks anyplace else. And the city's already overspent on the skate park. We're already overspent on Confluence Park, and that's only in phase 2, and we have 3 and 4 there. So before we look at this grandiosis and move forward on this, I think we ought to stop and say, do we have money, and are we putting our monies fairly across the city where we're spending our money? The other thing I want to comment is I heard Jennifer talk about public input. This just appeared on the active project list less than a month ago. So you may have thought you went out and got a lot of public input, but I don't think that this really has gone out and people know across the city, outside of the soccer people who are backing this, that where all their mitigation fees are going up to this park or being recommended to go up to this park. So I would hope in the future going forward, when you have major projects that are going to drain the public of their funds, they're going to create for the other citizens up in the Highlands that may not be soccer players, the amount of traffic that you're going to put up there, that you get it on the active project list early so other people that aren't have a specific interest in the project have a chance to know what's going on and voice their concerns. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else like to speak at this time? I'll ask one more time. Anybody else like to speak? All right, at this time, I will go ahead and close the public comment portion of the meeting. Thank you very much for all your well thought out comments, and I'm sure that gave a bunch of food for thought. Before we get into discussion, is there anything that you guys would like to add that might add some clarification to something that might have been said that we should know about?
So I think what staff would prefer to do is answer the pieces that you have heard in public comment that you would like us to respond to, as opposed to just going through a laundry list. So
Okay.
let us know what your interests are.
All right, great. Will do. Would you like to start?
I'll start. So I would just like to know that there was appropriate sewage and draining studies.
Do you want to talk about that, Doug?
My name is Doug Schlepp. I'm with the City of Issaquah Engineering, DSD. And there's a sewer analysis that was done after the SDP, and there's adequate sewage capacity for these facilities that are proposed. In addition, the city commissioned a stormwater analysis of all of Issaquah Highlands, all the ponds, all the impervious area, and what is proposed, and there's adequate stormwater facilities for the proposed improvements.
So are the rain gardens supposed to be mitigating the increased stormwater runoff? Is that what the point of these rain gardens are, all sprinkled around these different pads?
No, the rain gardens are to address water quality, and that would be reviewed further during construction permitting.
So I do realize that the stormwater runoff is not specifically addressed for us to vote on tonight, but I am curious, we must have a plan of where it's going to go. With putting in these turf fields, we're going to have increased, and we need to mitigate where some of that stormwater is going to be going. What roughly is that going to look like? Again, I realize that's not part of our packet, is the exact details of the engineering on it, but I am curious.
So based on the analysis that we received from the Parks Department, the existing Pad 1 fields drain to the wetland area. So the water quality component is to address the change in the type of turf from a natural turf to an artificial. So it's treating that stormwater before it goes into the wetland where it currently is drained to at this point. The other improvements that are proposed would be draining to existing stormwater facilities that are within Issaquah Highlands. There's W4 Pond, and there's also the Sunset Pond or Falls Pond that have been constructed since the Falls Pond was constructed since this improvement was first put in. So there's a variety of different facilities that would serve the proposed improvements, and they don't necessarily go to one location.
Okay, so there's just capacity at our existing areas to be able to service it?
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Keith?
Yeah, so I got a question with the, so we got the stormwater runoff, and I know if the turf, I'm assuming it's gonna be the little rubber balls. The crumb rubber that's put into it. What environmental effect will that have with the storm? Because I know that stuff runs off all over the place. So what kind of environmental impact is that gonna have going into the storm?
The fields, when they're constructed, have under drainage, which are deep underneath the surface. So there's curbing around the edges of the fields that prevent some of that surface water runoff, and the fields would be draining appropriately into the drainage system, which would then feed the rain garden and then overflow into the wetland areas.
So what about the foot traffic, the cleats and everything else that are running on it that's carrying it outside of the playing fields?
That's just part of the routine maintenance within the park and containment with the field areas. We have in some of the areas, some buffer areas to help contain that transfer.
In addition, the stormwater facilities are constructed such that there's a catch, they call them catch basins. So any material that would get washed into the storm system would be caught in that catch basin. And the city has a regular routine maintenance of removing that debris then from the catch basins so that it doesn't go further downstream.
Okay, I understand.
Can I pull off of that, on page 50 of our packet, point 9? The project could potentially cause disruption to the functions and values of the adjacent wetlands by adding pollutants and creating human intrusions not currently present. And then we leave it at that. I'm curious, when are we going to be addressing that? Unforeseen pollutants right now are left as probable but unaddressed. Again, this is page 50, number 9.
So, I mean, one of the concerns is with the all-weather field, and that's a change in type of use from natural field to all-weather. So the runoff from that is proposed to be treated in the wetland area. One of the conditions I believe that we have in the site development permit, maybe Mike, you can help me with this, is to go through and identify signage that may have fallen down or fell into disrepair to restore that so that the people who are walking, I know we're going to have a new walking path around Pad 1, that they're aware of the critical nature of those facilities so that they're advised of the things that, you know, can and can't be done. So there's certain safeguards that are going to be put into place to protect the critical area, in this case, the wetlands.
Thank you.
I actually have a different question on the same subject, but coming at it from a different perspective. I see that we've been looking at replacing grass with artificial turf going back to 2008. That's when the staff first talked about taking the grass up and putting artificial turf down. Since 2008, the National Center for Health Research and 3 other federal agencies have been investigating the safety of crumb rubber in artificial turf. And the first study that came out said that there was no health problem. And all 3 federal agencies said, but that study was only looking for one aspect with crumb rubber, and that was there lead present in crumb rubber. There is no lead, but they pointed out 3 carcinogens, PAHs, which they say if you breathe it in the air can cause cancer and other health issues and also can cause birth defects. So 3 federal agencies, the leader is the National Center of Health Research, has some concerns on this. They don't have findings. There's no findings right now. So just like lead back in the 1950s, lead paint, there were no federal findings. In fact, there wasn't even a federal statement on lead paint until 1978. Although we stopped using it in the 1960s. It took the feds until 78 to say stop using it. My question is, where do we have the finances when and if there is a health issue with crumb rubber to go back after this major expense here to remove all this grass, put in the artificial turf, take it back out again? Where is our due diligence on this financial exposure? So I'll put that out there. I don't know who can answer that, but let me ask one, or make one more observation. Crumb rubber does not stay put. If you go to Snoqualmie Ridge, I'm a soccer grandmother, a soccer mom. It is in their nose, it's in their ears, and my grandkids live in Snoqualmie Ridge. I'm vacuuming crumb rubber from my carpet in Tallis. I had a toddler that was 3 years old playing on crumb rubber artificial turf, and this baby had it in her mouth and in her nose. I don't know if that's safe or not safe, but it's not just a water runoff question. I think we as a city have due diligence for the money we're going to spend on artificial turf. Will we take that all back out again later? So a little bit of a lecture there as well as a question.
May I add one thing? So just for the sake of purview tonight, correct me if I'm wrong, Jennifer. So the Pad 1 is proposed as an all-weather field, and I think crumb rubber is the most commonly used surface. but we're not specifying what the surface is with this permit, just to
So
be
that,
clear.
let me amend the question then. What are you going to put in?
So
The proposed surfacing is consistent with what is currently up there, which would be the crumb rubber infill.
Hi, Jeff Watling, Parks Recreation Director. Great question. And certainly nationally, locally, that is a question that public agencies are asking and seeking throughout this country and region. One that we'll want to pay very close tabs to. We are advocates for very, very safe fields. Should a time come that something is found or discovered, the issue is in the crumb rubber, not the grass fiber surface. So I would imagine, should a change or a retrofit need to be made, we'd be retrofitting the infill portion, the rubber portion, not the entire field.
Not the nylon grass.
Right, correct.
Thank you.
Can I
Jim.
ask a question, Jennifer? I think this is meant for you. But a few times you said things have yet to be funded. And so maybe just a little bit more clarification on that, when you see that happening. And then second, the $1 million that's coming out of the mitigation fund, could you talk a little bit about that and maybe even what the mitigation fund is, how big it is, and what percentage of it this is, $1 million?
I'm happy to address those, though those budgetary questions are ultimately up to council to answer and fund. Right now, the project is currently funded, the Pad 1 project alone, initial funding for the fields only was the $1.55 million from the park bond. We've received $825,000 in grants from the Recreation Conservation Office as well as King County. That's 3 grants totaling the $825,000. We've also received a $5,000 community match, in addition to budgeted funding of $1 million. Project due to public input. There's some discrepancy in the funding. There's some things that haven't been funded yet. So due to all the additional inputs and the scope expansion outside the fields, there's additional funding requests being put forth to council right now, which is in deliberations.
Do you have a dollar amount on that?
It's roughly an additional $1.4 million.
I can just add to that. So what is being proposed to be constructed next year and what's before City Council for deliberations would be constructing all of the Pad 1 area. So the field, the expanded parking, the expanded park lane. As Jennifer said, that is ultimately a council decision and council discretion. That request would include the additional park mitigation funds to be spent. Park mitigation funds are park impact fees. So as new development comes in, they're being asked to pay for their fair share into the public system. What the city looks for when expending park impact fee or park mitigation funds is capacity building projects. Certainly as we've analyzed this project, this is a project that would benefit current residents, and I think the park bond funding really justifies that. There's also a capacity component to this project. It is adding capacity to the system and capacity for new residents. Thus the request for park mitigation funding. That fund, as you would imagine, as development occurs, there's money being spent. There's a requirement, a state statute, that park mitigation funds, impact fees need to be spent within 6 years. So it is intended to be a system that is, has revenue coming in and is being expended. There are anticipated additional impact fee funds that were scheduled to come in as development is proposed. Those developments that are even vested within the city and are going to be allowed to happen next year, it's anticipated there'd be additional impact fee money that would be coming into that system. So it's intended to be investments to help not fully fund investments of the system, but invest the proportionate capacity for projects, much like this one. Pad 4 I don't believe is budgeted, nor is it necessarily scheduled or on a schedule. That would, again, I think consistent with how it was presented, really would be a community conversation. We're just now going to be updating the Parks and Open Space and Trails Plan next year. I would imagine PAD 4 and that discussion will be a community dialogue and trying to anticipate how that and where that is prioritized in future investments. But that would be an investment a number of years out.
So I have a question. So with this plan, are you obstructing or blocking or taking away any existing bike paths or pedestrian paths or animal paths that you're aware of?
No, we're not. We're actually providing more connectivity and more walking paths with the proposal before you. Loop paths so people can walk throughout the ponds and around the fields.
Scott?
Great. So I've got a couple questions here, maybe for Mike, maybe for you. So pardon me while I ramble a bit here. So clarifying question, PAD 2, is that also planned for artificial turf upgrade in the future?
Not at this time.
Not at this time. Okay. To the topic of on-street parking, definitely for the expansion of the roadway, as we've heard echoed throughout the room tonight, I as well would be a strong advocate for some measure of traffic calming. I as well have on multiple occasions experienced vehicles going through that way and in a rapid fashion, right? And so in light of the fact that we're adding to pedestrian capacity, I think it certainly raises the question and concern even further that some sort of mechanism needs to be put in place to help mitigate that. Continuing on that same topic of the on-street parking, do we have an understanding of parking placement in conjunction with the traffic circles? Meaning, and this is for Mike probably, how close in proximity are parking stalls allowed to the traffic circles? And I call that out because what I have experienced, what I have observed, is that folks will park right up into the traffic circle. So is there a way that we could further mitigate that issue?
So in going up there, it looks to me like the road is ready for new striping, and I think that would be something that could be addressed. I'm sure there's a traffic standard that addresses the separation distance between on-street parking and that traffic circle. Doug may know what that number is. But yeah, that's something that can be addressed. Additionally, with the traffic calming, with the restriping and the new paint, that should serve to address that to some extent.
You can see the tick marks that are showing for the stalls, how they're, like 30 feet. They're starting about 30 feet off of it, and that's a scientific measurement. I just want you to know.
And certainly when we restripe that, we will definitely address that. But if it's an issue now, we can take a look at that and see if
Something
we
to
need
take into
pull
consideration.
back.
Maybe it's a kick out of some sort from the curb, right, that would further prohibit parking in that area or that vicinity. Someone had mentioned a raised crosswalk. Big advocate for that as well. I think that would prove beneficial for pedestrian traffic as well as another mechanism for traffic calming, if you will.
So, you know what, and I think we're getting a clear message and we can write a condition. I would like to, if the commission's comfortable with it, leave it relatively vague. I will tell you, the speed humps can be very effective. The challenge with the raised crosswalk and the ped table, they can be really effective for that. I was joking with my 18-year-old as we walked through University Village the other day that when she was 3 and we were on a raised table there, she said, "Is this a sidewalk or is this the street?" And I have seen pedestrians just walk straight out onto those tables because especially teens and kids, they just don't perceive that they've walked into the street. So I think what we want to do is very carefully consider in conjunction with the Parks Department and Public Works Engineering, which traffic calming measures are most appropriate for the uses and ages of the users.
That'd be appreciated, for sure. Moving on. Ongoing maintenance. On page 32, subsection E, there was a call out from Rabanco around waste collection. It appeared to be open. Is there any further context specific to that call out? And where I'm going with this as well is also just a question of ongoing maintenance, care, and feeding of the park will be owned by the city. Is that correct? Okay.
Correct.
Okay.
So the update there would be Rabonco isn't the provider any longer.
Yes, Cleanscapes.
That was a challenge when
Whomever.
I wrote this, was how much of the material did I want to strike out, because this is an interesting way to do a staff report, as you can tell. So thank you for bringing that to our
Yeah,
attention.
of course, of course.
And feel free to give us feedback on this approach, because we are going to have a couple of these coming up, either between you guys or the Development Commission.
Okay, fantastic. Clarifying question, no impact to the critical areas has been identified at this point in time?
Correct.
So, yeah, so the critical areas are mapped, and the plan as we have it today, there's no encroachment into those critical areas. There is a condition that will require a surveyor to be on site during construction to maintain those buffers and make sure that no one's going on site, and then they provide a certified letter that indicates that the construction boundaries stayed within their requirements.
Okay, fantastic, thank you. Clarification for Pad 1 parking extension or the adjustment of parking stalls. In looking at the display here, is the extension just to the north, or are we doing an extension to the south on the existing parking structure as well?
Currently, the parking lot is in this area and has a little different shape and functionality with the entrance being over in this area. We'd be moving it over, and so the expansion would be a little to this north here, but mostly to the, I guess that's the north that way.
That's north.
I had to
Yeah.
think a minute. To the north. And to address a question that was posed earlier, there is, where's my little mouse? Lost it. 50 feet from here out to maintain the buffer is a power pole, but we're staying within the distance from the utility structure.
Okay, so I guess follow-on question then is, did I hear correctly, we are extending the parking lot to the south?
Not so much
is that
to the
existing
south.
structure?
That's pretty much right on where it's at.
Where it is today,
Over in here.
okay.
Just a little reshaping of an edge to allow for this drop-off and some, some flow. But the majority of the expansion is to the north.
Okay, fantastic. Next topic, focusing on lighting. What are the thoughts around how late would we have illumination in place? How late would events be intended to go?
10 o'clock
10
is
p.m.
the,
Okay.
it's the proposed.
And then lights are off after that, and that's
Yes.
controlled by the city,
Yes.
not by participants
Correct.
utilizing the fields?
Yes, we have a programming system that operates the lighting.
Okay, fantastic. All right, so final question is just specific to timeline. So what I think I heard was that Pad 1 is Phase 1?
Phase 1 of Phase 2.
Phase 1 of Phase 2.
So yes,
Scope,
this is
yeah.
the first to be implemented of the entire site development plan that's before you.
Okay. So scope of Phase 1 includes updates to the grass fields to turf, expansion of the parking lot structure that is already in place, expansion of the roadway north to south, including parking. And am I missing anything else in regards to scope for Phase 1?
Picnic shelter, or?
Shelter?
Yeah.
Okay, okay. And target timeline to complete Phase 1?
We're hoping to go to construction next year. We have grant funds that would expire January of 2018, so it'd be our hope to enter into 2017 construction period for the Pad 1 project.
And what is typical duration for a project of this scope? Is it 6 months? Is it 12 months?
This is about a 6 to 8 month project.
Okay. And any thoughts around what Phase 2 effort would look like or where we would focus next? Did I hear Pad 4 or are we contingent?
That's, I think, to be determined as we go out for the post update as to what the next community priorities for the park are for implementation. Ultimately, it would be the goal to get everything installed at some point in time, but it is just a matter of funding and community priority to make that happen.
Okay, perfect. That concludes my questions. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Scott, and thank you for getting the memo on the uniform tonight. So. No one else followed the lead there.
I'm with you.
Thanks. Okay, I have as many or more, or maybe fewer than Scott did, but
It's
I'm
a
going to.
competition.
What's that?
It's a competition.
It's a no, yeah,
play
and
catch up from the time
I'll
that we
try
got
not
away.
to repeat. I may emphasize a few things that he stated, but I'll try not to repeat. I'm going to break it into kind of 4 sections, sort of traffic and parking, usage of the park plan, and things not addressed. That's kind of how I've broken it down. I'm going to start with traffic and parking. I have a handful of things, and it may be incongruent in the way I do it, but I've been taking notes all evening. So first of all, the traffic signal at Park. You know, I looked at what I could find on the traffic study, which wasn't a whole lot at this point, but I'm seeing contradictions throughout a number of these things in terms of, you know, the traffic study is underestimating the amount of traffic that's going to go there, but parking, we have too much parking, right? So I kind of feel like, you know, those are those in itself are incongruent, and yeah, I personally believe that, you know, we do need the extra parking for the extra amenities that we're putting up there and the extra traffic that's going to go up there. But I do worry about not so much the traffic signal there per se, but how does that impact the school, particularly in the evenings, and especially if they have events, you know, curriculum night or, you know, concerts or whatever it happens to be. How does that traffic light affect the school traffic and the major thoroughfare going in and out of the Highlands? And I don't know that I have good information on that.
And some of that detail will occur as that traffic signal gets designed, hopefully next year if that gets funded, as far as what the queuing signals are for that intersection. It's a little too much detail at this point for where we were, just that the need is there due to the traffic volumes during peak hours to warrant that. The park's peak hours are different than the school's peak hours, and that was identified in the traffic study as well.
Until they're not, until there's a conflict, which
Right,
there are.
which-
So I
correct.
just want to make sure that, you know, it's not too painful when that happens. Some of you may have, you know, when something's going on at PCMS, trying to get up Issaquah Falls City Road is pretty painful. So I just want to make sure that we're being smart about that. I do believe, you know, that we do need a signal there for safety reasons, but I just want to keep an eye on that. In terms of the traffic and current usage, are the peak, what's the difference between the current peak usage and the expected peak usage once Pad 1 is built out with this new plan?
It's pretty much just volume, because you have on Pad 3 a current use of different sports activities occurring in the evening hours for practices and games on weekends. That use would get spread out onto this field as well, so there'd be an increase in volume of the number of vehicles that would be coming up during those peak hours.
So, again, there were some contradictions. It seems to me, and I don't know what you guys think, but while I hate taking up park space, I do think if we're going to put these amenities in there that we need to accommodate those cars. Otherwise, we're going to spill out into other neighborhoods, and I think it's pretty well thought out here. The concerns I have about parking, I love the idea of expanding the road, and I'm also very in favor of the traffic calming, whatever that ends up being. But one of my concerns up there, and one of my major pet peeves is, not just up there, but all throughout the Highlands, is the parking direction. It is it's northbound facing parking only, and people, because of human nature, they go, oh, there's a spot, I'm just going to pull in. They're going to face southbound, which causes all kinds of problems. There's traffic flow problems. There are, you know, you might have a child getting out of the passenger side into the road. You have people pulling out into the road to get to leave, which puts them into oncoming traffic. So I would really like to see something relating to signage, and I'm going to use the term enforcement. I'm not sure how that's going to happen, but something that really, you know, drives home that we can't have people parking facing the southbound direction if we're only on that eastbound lane facing north. So I don't know what can be done there, but I think it's pretty important, safety-wise. Let's see here. No more parking spots. I was going to say, I like the idea of the raised crosswalk, but I like, I understand what you said, and I'm open to not extremely vague, but sort of a directed vague statement about getting some not only traffic calming, but some pedestrian safety features in there.
Jeff, can I do a quick plug on that? The new cross features that are in downtown Issaquah now, the lit, where it's on demand.
The rectangular rapid flashing beacon?
Yeah, so that there is a visual representation for that oncoming traffic that, hey, somebody is trying to cross the road. Again, just another option for consideration. Something that gives a visual cue to drivers, because obviously folks are going to be coming through there trying to find parking, distracted. I think that's just another mechanism that would help mitigate a potential issue.
You mean the crosswalk we were told we can't have in the Highlands because it's not consistent with all the other crosswalks in the city?
Well, that was a while ago, Jeff.
Yeah, okay. That one, yeah.
We could revisit that, right?
I have a question.
Thank you, Scott.
I read in a couple different places in here, a reference to the roundabout at College. And this is maybe just inconsistency, but I'm curious. I read mini roundabout and compact roundabout. Are they the same thing? Are those official terms? What does that mean exactly?
So I thought I had changed all those for uniformity's sake to traffic circle. I don't know that those fit the definition of a true roundabout, which is higher volumes. But for the sake of what we're discussing, a mini traffic circle or a mini roundabout or a compact, whatever they're referenced as, they're all referencing the same smaller traffic circle, a la the one that already exists in the park. Nothing high volume.
Okay, I didn't know if there was a difference between mini and compact, if we were looking at two different things, or if they are
I'm not sure those are
interchangeable terms.
technical terms.
They're not technical terms, okay. All right, so the drop-off area, I really support that idea as well. This again comes down to human nature. It's far away from the fields. I know when somebody's running late to drop their child off, or they had to run back and pick up some equipment or whatever, they're naturally just going to go to what's the most convenient for them and not really worry about anybody else. So when I talk about enforcement, obviously we can't have Issaquah Police Department up there dealing with that necessarily. I would implore, and I'm a parent of kids who've played sports and I've coached, and particularly when there are tournaments and other things, I would implore you guys to look at having parent volunteers help keep traffic flowing if you can. I know there's probably some safety issues and so forth, but really think about how do you get people in and out of there safely and quickly and doing the right things so that it's good for everybody, not just that one person who's, dare I use the term, selfish at that moment while it impacts everybody else. So I'd be thinking about that sort of thing, because we all want to make this work. I think if we do this, we want to make it work, and the way it doesn't work is if people decide that they're going to make their own rules. And that's when things start to fall apart, and that's when people start getting frustrated, whether they're speeding down the road, whether they're parking the wrong direction, whether they're taking up two spots, whether they're parking and letting their kids off, or whatever it is. That's when stuff starts to break. It's not the plan, it's not the execution of the plan, it's the response to it by human beings who are doing things at their own, to serve their own needs. So.
Can I tag in on that?
Yeah.
So I guess another item for consideration is maybe just one-way traffic direction through that parking lot, the north parking lot. Is that something to consider? That would force, if you will, as traffic comes in from a parking perspective, if you want to do a drop-off, this is the only way you can come in. Your exit is this path. I don't know what thoughts are on that, but again.
Yeah.
I am really glad the Parks Department is here to hear that. I would be hesitant to make that a condition of approval at this point. I think that those are the kinds of things that we need to study at the construction drawing phase. And I don't necessarily disagree. I do get concerned when we do one-way things. The last person at the one-way is going to go the wrong way. So, and it may also be that, it's that 10% of the time when things are at their maximum use where that really becomes important, and that may be the way the Parks Department runs it during those few hours rather than 100% of the time.
Okay, and a couple more things on traffic and parking.
I think Tara had.
Oh, I'm sorry, Tara.
Well, I was going to just touch on that. not to suggest a solution, but just to suggest a scenario that you said of a kid being dropped off late. Would they run down the road or would they run down the pathway? And if the road is the shortest distance, they're going to run down the road. So just consider that scenario, and then not going to offer a suggestion because I'm not an expert in this area, but just think about that.
The parking on pad 4, the idea of that, I would really like to see if there's something that could be done there. You know, I don't know what the restrictions or requirements or opportunities are, but it seems to me that that if it's a possibility, we should take advantage of that right now. And then in terms of the school sharing parking, I don't know what the plan is around that either, if they can or if they will. But if they do, am I seeing a path between the parking garage, the parking lot and pad 4?
Yes, there is a
Is that
connection
existing?
already down.
More of a drop area, right? Well, that's what it's being used
being
for,
used-
right? And that was
Yeah.
someone who alluded to the fact that
On
people are
College
parking
Drive, yeah.
on College Drive and blocking traffic, right? So, Jeff, can you clarify your call out specific to parking on pad 4?
Well,
You mean the maintenance yard?
the maintenance yard existing, the existing, as a temporary space for both the school and the park. You know, I don't know where that discussion starts, or if it started already, or if it's completely off the table, but where does that go?
I think there's an internal conversation between a number of departments that would have to take place. That's sort of Public Works Operations area right now. Don't think they're using it a lot, and so it's a good question. I would leave that up to the Parks Department to see if they can do that as part of their implementation.
Yeah, obviously, I don't think it should be a condition, but I just think it's nice to have. Let's utilize it if we've got it. Okay, so that's it for traffic. I'm going to skip the usage thing because I think I got most of that answered. Oh, sorry, one more traffic. I have to bring up, I saw 6 motorcycle parking spots in the plan. Is that still part of the plan? I saw that at least in the original. And I don't know where we have it in Central Park, but I would like to request, I mean, hopefully if there are people riding scooters and motorcycles, I being one of them, but I would, and this might sound selfish, but it's really not. The idea of motorcycle parking is that you put it in places that you can't put a car parking space, and that it's convenient enough that it's not just tucked way back in the corner and, you know, just an afterthought. So I'd like to ask you to look at that and see where people can park scooters and motorcycles where they're not taking up car spots, sort of in the margins, if you will. Okay. You talked about, let's see. No, I want to talk about that. One question about lighting is that, what was I saw a little bit of feedback, but generally, what's the tenor of you know, people's thoughts on this from the community? I remember when we were looking at pad 3 and talking about lighting, people were very, very concerned about it. I don't think the impact is as great as people thought it was going to be, but then again, I don't live up there. I also know that it's been a huge amenity for the soccer, lacrosse, football, baseball communities, to the degree that they're using space down there sometimes. And I just want to know what people are saying, because I haven't heard anything.
Initially, you know, at our first public meeting, that was one of the topics that arose, and we addressed it. And as we went through the design process, rather than using your standard halide lights, which is what existing on pad 3 right now, recommended going to the LED to help prevent and address some of those concerns that the neighbors were having as far as the glare and overspill and stuff, especially since we're also adjacent to critical areas. And, you know, by the time we had our last public meeting up in Issaquah Highlands on June 22nd, you know, there's always those concerns. It was more of a not in my backyard, but overall, I think the community has accepted that the turf fields would have associated lighting with them, and there's actually been very little subsequent discussion on it.
Okay.
Can you
Okay.
speak a little to the details about the lighting? You mentioned that it's going to be LED. Is it, I don't know what it currently is on pad 3. Is it going to be warm lighting? Is the lighting hooded to be able to kind of limit that kind of effect on the neighborhood? I can't help but utilize our lighting expert here.
Since
Gotta
you
be
brought
called
me
at some
out.
time. Yeah.
My name's Chris Fote. I'm with Stantec. I'm sub-consultant to Dave Andrews, working for City Parks Department. Obviously, the lighting is always a major concern, especially when you're lighting a brand-new field. You have a great example of the recent lighting that was completed on the adjacent pad, which was the most aggressively shielded at that time. The improvements in lighting technology have been very dramatic in the last few years. So as a comparison to what is out there now, there is substantial additional reduction in what is visible in regards to off-site, and also spill light is greatly more reduced, because the new lighting design that's being considered here is more of a full cutoff style, which cuts the light off much better control-wise. Plus the LED lighting itself, it provides the same amount of light using 40% less light and energy. So it does not take as much light to get the light onto the field. And the lighting itself will be similar in design to recreational lighting levels, suitable for safe play for all the program sports on the field.
Great, thank you.
So in the, I was going to ask about timing, but Scott asked about that, and I feel like I have what I need, except the impacts during that 6 to 8 months of construction. What are we talking about in terms of who's going to be impacted? When's this going to happen? Is this going to throw off some of these teams? And so
Most
forth?
certainly, and we will be communicating that and setting forth notices with all of our groups who've been very active in the whole planning process from the get-go, knowing that, this field will be out of commission. Of course, there'll be traffic control and other things in place during the construction period, but we would certainly notify Issaquah Community Highlands Association, the community, as well as, post it on our web, and do what we can to get the word out to all community members about the construction occurring.
Will there be efforts put forth to provide alternative spaces for these teams that will be impacted during their seasons or in practice seasons?
Well, most of summer, surprisingly, is actually our least use up there. Uses tend to be more in the fall and during the school year times, so the bulk of the construction is not going to hit our high peak seasons. Of course, it will be impacted, and yes, we would try and accommodate the teams where we could in the interim.
Okay, and then the, so pad 1, this whole thing, are we talking in that 6 to 8 months, all of this will be complete? We're not gonna
That's the
do
goal.
sub-phases of these things, right?
It's
That's the
ultimately
plan.
up, if we have our wish, that's the request before council,
Okay.
is to implement all of it. However, if they opt to fund differently, then of course we'd look at phasing and accordingly to
Okay, and then
council.
my last question on that area is the picnic shelter use. What's the current picnic shelter use? I see that we're adding a couple more. Does it require that demand, or is that demand there now to require more?
It is. It was
Okay.
one of the things that came out of our first community meeting. That is probably one of the most heavily used picnic shelters up there, and there aren't many within the park already. And you can go up almost any day, even during the week, and find that it is very well occupied. So providing another opportunity for people to have a separate party or a gathering or a barbecue after practice or something would be, was at the request of the community.
Okay, great. And then to my last topic, sort of the not addressed, it was addressed by a couple of the speakers. The adjacent properties, I know not within our purview necessarily, but the Bellevue College property, the 43 acres adjacent, the bike park, et cetera. Is there anything you can share on what's going on with those spaces at this time, and how approving this or not approving this, obviously approving it would have some sort of impact? Do we know? Is it going to cause any problems or restrictions or keep us from doing something else on those other spaces?
So Dave has different information than I do. I thought the schools were still interested in this, so we'll see what happens. You know, the challenge that, you know, we face when you build a whole new community is there's always pieces that you don't know and pieces that you do know. And we try and make the best choices we can on the piece that's in front of us. I always appreciate Dave's comprehensive view, which always extends past the borders of what we're looking at and tries to consider those impacts. I don't disagree that having a broad perspective, I'm just not sure that there is anything that's would change directly what's in front of you, and especially because it's the northernmost pieces that are under consideration.
What's the latest on the bike park? I haven't heard anything about that lately.
The, as I understand it, there has been a very heavy pushback from BPA. This is BPA, I believe. BPA on that activity under the facility, and there is, I think, still some discussions going on, so I think that's why it still shows up. I don't know a lot more about where those discussions are.
All right, and my final question, I promise, is Parks Department, have you had conversations with the police department regarding, regarding their point of view on this, the additional parking, the additional spaces? Obviously we've had some challenges with people. I won't necessarily generalize who they are, but people parking, littering, loud music, all kinds of stuff, and adding more parking, adding more sort of tucked away spaces, could add to that, or at least shift some of that. Have you had conversations with the police department?
Not directly, but indirectly, as with all of our parks, we recommend to the public, if you see something, say something. And this is actually adding further activity to spaces that are now dark and not lit and, not readily accessible by pathways, aren't activated spaces. The site development plan is activating more space, which gets more eyes on the areas, which gets more light on the areas, and provides people the more opportunities to be able to report something when they do see activities that occur.
Have there been any, I don't know if we have any anywhere in the city, but are there any emergency, I don't know what you call them, little emergency stations if somebody needs to hit a panic button, for example, and call the police? Are any of those around our city at this point in any of our parks or parking garages or anything like that?
They're in some parking garages. Swedish has them. They tend to be in the higher use on off hours, like a hospital at night, and not as commonly in, I don't know about other city parks, but a park like this, that the lights go out at 10 o'clock, there's usually a limited number, and they close at that point or at dusk.
Okay, I just think emergency call boxes are something to look at, consider, just across the board, not just here, but I think in all of our parks.
I just wanted to give Jeff an opportunity to speak, because it looked like he was waiting to say something maybe about the bike parking or the adjacent open space, and I didn't, you may know like 10 times more than I do.
No, hardly. Just quickly on that adjacent 40 acres that Dave spoke of, what a great opportunity. Again, as the Parks Recreation Open Space Trails Plan update happens and we start looking at that city-owned property that's in unincorporated King County, I don't think anything in this would preclude us master planning and really having that public engagement and seeing how we can better connect. I think there's a great connection opportunity from the valley up here to Central Park, but that would be well within that planning process that we're going to do next year.
Thank you. So yeah, then I guess I would just finally, encourage some really good language, I'll say it like that, that you will put together probably, regarding the road, the traffic calming, and hopefully signage and possibly enforcement around that I don't know about enforcement, that's probably not possible, but I think those are the things for me that are pretty critical in this.
Well, the traffic code already requires that people park in the direction of travel. So I'm not sure I'm not sure what else, and I know people who've gotten tickets in the city of Issaquah for parking the wrong way, so.
Happened in the Highlands, I can tell you that.
Okay.
And I had that conversation. No, and I'm bringing more light to it. I will continue to bring more light to it. I've had the conversation with the police department.
Yeah, no, I know.
But they have one traffic officer. So it's, it's up to us, right? It's up, not us, this body, but us collectively as community citizens. But we also need to keep bringing it up to the police department. I do think it's an actual safety issue. It's not just an inconvenience, so. And this invites it more than anything I've seen.
Right, and having been the planner that wrote that old staff report a million years ago.
I remember.
I know you do. I remember there was a lot of discussion about that, and because all the pedestrian and bike facilities have been consolidated on the eastern side of the road, that's why the parking was there, because there wasn't any pedestrian facilities on the other side. But I do recognize that some people choose to then, not use the traffic circle to come around and park, but.
Well, especially if it's busy and they see a spot, they're not going to drive all the way around with 4 cars in front of them.
Yeah.
It's about my spot.
Yeah.
It's mine.
Yeah.
Jeff, can I tag on that as well? So here's a question for future thought. For large-scale events, I assume the Parks Department will have visibility as to when those events are going to occur. So where I'm going is we have 4 events taking place on Pad 1, and we've got and then we have multiple events taking place on Pad 2 as well. Is there a process in place in which law enforcement is engaged to direct traffic in light of the fact that this is going to significantly drive volume during those times? And I'll tag on to that, and Jeff can attest to this as well, that Park Drive is already notably busy and slowing during peak hours. So rush hour traffic home or in the mornings as well. So again, spinning to the future, visibility, advanced visibility to scheduling, has there been discussion to that effect?
To date, we haven't had an activity large enough to warrant police use. Of course, if we knew something was coming up of such magnitude, we would do what we could to communicate both with the Issaquah Highlands community as well as law enforcement to ensure safety for such an event should one occur. But that's going to be a rather rare opportunity that a huge mass volume.
I'll do a plug from maybe a year or 2 ago. There was an officer directing traffic, and the light will help mitigate some of this, of course. But again, as we do this, this is going to be a draw, and we're going to see a lot of people, a lot of traffic coming up to engage, participate, and utilize.
Yeah, and I think it's more than informing and communicating, because if you see what some of the churches do, for example, they employ King County sheriffs or sheriff deputies or others to help with traffic. I don't know who initiates that, if that's the church, if that's the city, if that's the county, but it's not just a matter of letting the police know that, hey, there's going to be a lot of people here for a tournament this weekend. It's actively engaging traffic control, and again, it could be Parks Department, the city, it could be the tournament directors or whatever, but I do think it's something we need to really consider. And to your point, you say, well, I don't know that we've had an event large enough to warrant that. I'd have to disagree with that, because I don't think we really know what size event really causes that. What's more than filling all the parking spots than we already have done, so.
So one question I have is the number of all-weather fields that we're going to have. How does that compare to Tibbetts?
Tibbetts does not have any.
Okay. I think that the question probably for the Parks Department, not that I'm trying to put words in your mouth, but this is an expansion, and it may become because we deal with it, with the volleyball tournament, the national volleyball tournament. It becomes a requirement on the permit of the people who are using the facility. So I think that as the Parks Department begins, I was afraid I was out over my skis. As the Parks Department, begins to utilize these on a regular basis, I think there'll be conditions on the permit of the teams if they're scheduling a certain volume of activity,
Right.
that those kinds of services be required.
But who would be required to provide those services? Because it could be death by 1,000 cuts, right? It could be lots of smaller uses equaling a very large use, for example, right? And so who do you task with that, or that cost or that effort?
So I'll address it, because Lucy, I was saying, yes, you're exactly right. What I was whispering to Jen is obviously managing this facility, managing a new capacity, rental groups, I would imagine, heavy use of both of these fields is likely going to be weekends. We're likely having either the same rental group wanting to rent it. If it's going to be a tournament, we have our rental agreements, and that would be the vehicle with which we would place a condition and say, you know what, this is hitting a certain threshold as we're managing this new space. You know what, condition upon this rental, you're also going to need to somehow find a way to best manage or work with PD or find a way to address that.
I think that's fair. Do you have those thresholds in place today?
We do not, because again, this is a new facility with both of these synthetic turf facilities.
Yeah, so I guess I would probably out of my area of expertise
I
or
would
purview, but I would
recommend
request
define
that you consider those thresholds, because if they don't exist right now and nobody's excited to go do them, it ain't gonna happen. So, but I do want to
great
make sure
point.
that the community is handled and managed properly through this process, and that we're not causing more problems than we need to.
Yeah, and I would
Yep.
add even the users of the facility themselves. It becomes an impact if it's
Yep, exactly.
over capacity. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, if you look at, the biggest soccer tournament, for instance, in the area, it's always held out at 60 acres. They have the most fields. But what's going to happen now is you're going to have another field within a year at IMS. You've got Preston, which has 3 fields now. You're going to have 4 fields here. You're going to start getting a band, people putting a lot of these fields together, and there's going to be a big tournament that's going to include all of these fields and all the other fields in the area.
Yeah.
That may happen. And yeah, personal note, my daughter has played in a lot of those tournaments as well, so I know that experience, and you're exactly right.
Okay.
Need to manage.
Reiteration to identification on the condition in advance is beneficial, right? Just so the threshold is in place and we have awareness.
Anybody else? Ski.
I do have a different traffic question, is more on restroom traffic. So it looks like even in pad 1, we just have the one existing restroom, which is just one boys, one girl. So like we had talked about, you get however many people on this field, 100 here, 100 there, 100 there, 100 there. What's the impact for restrooms?
That's a very good question. And, eventually, it would be our hope to upgrade it and put in a 2-seater or a 4-seater, however you want to call it. But for the time now, the community felt that they were willing to move forward and continue using what we have. We understand with that comes, maintenance issues. But until we're able to afford a replacement restroom, the one that we have would serve the facility.
Does the park currently have infrastructure in place as it is now, if you were going to eventually upgrade the restrooms?
Yes.
Perhaps that becomes another condition as well as we look to the future of increased volume, big events. Portable units, if you
Yep.
will, need to be taken into consideration as another condition.
Yep.
That part of your permit, Jeff?
Yep.
Okay.
Is it today for use of the park?
Yeah, certain size rentals, yes, we require that.
Okay, thanks.
Perfect.
I've got two comments really for the Parks Department. The first is that while I realize that we're not really looking at details about this, a lot of our attention's been on these play fields. I was a little disappointed to not see kind of a larger scale play area. I think that this presents a really good opportunity for families to be able to congregate while they're having a sibling participating, being able to have adequate facilities for a lot of families to be interacting. Again, I know we're not looking at these details, but I really wish that we had a larger area, especially here on Pad 1, with a lot of variety. I wish I knew where it was. I feel like I read that there was going to be a 5-piece play area. I could be wrong, but I read that in our packet. But I really wish that we had a larger area to be able to accommodate really a lot of families and being able to interact together in our community. And I really didn't see that kind of being in the space that's allotted for the details that we have now.
The playground that is actually there right now is quite sizable, and is heavily used.
It is heavily used, and so
Yeah.
especially with this increased demand that we're going to be having, and thinking about kind of the way that we use our environment, moms with strollers parking off to the side, we want to accommodate that kind of space that we don't necessarily always think about when we're planning our parks, and yet can make a big impact, and so I wanted to kind of draw attention to that.
Well, and that's partly why when you look at each of the pads, there are future playgrounds or tot lots or whatever play area inclusions just for that purpose. Because of the way the whole property is laid out, you can't put one centrally located playground for all of the fields. There's too much distance. So having one at each site, so when your child's playing at that game, you do have that alternate activity as long as well as the pathways around that space for the parents to be able to walk.
I do appreciate that at all those different pads, but I think Pad 1 really presents an opportunity for us to have a lot of community interactions and being able to have a lot of families interacting on the play area as they're drawn to this area for other reasons. My second comment is that I was recently poring over Issaquah census data. And while it's really important to create a beautiful community for our families, about a third of our community is actually single individuals. And so when we look at this plan, I think what's part of so appealing to it is what is really Pad 4, and seeing that we're having something that's inclusive to all members of our community, and hearing that it's unfunded, untimelined is a little disappointing. And so whether it's increasing our mitigation fees for people who are using these sports fields, for-profit community groups that are utilizing these spaces, whether it's kind of upping that a little bit, I really would like to see an emphasis on a push towards Pad 4, because I really think it's important for our community to be involving all members that we have, especially ones that may not necessarily always be as prevalent in our community and as vocal. And so I'd like to just really voice my support for having this whole space really be inclusive of all members of our community.
And one thing I would say, and your guys' interest and comments on funding and phasing totally make sense. Please communicate with the council, because we're really just the land plan. That's really the purview that we get. And just like we don't get to ask what bank an applicant is borrowing money from and, how they're doing it. We do get to look at phasing in terms of if there are, the part that they want to do first can't survive without the part that they want to do last. But overall, that's really a council decision, and you're bringing up good, thoughtful issues, and I think it's always helpful for the council to understand how these things appear to the community and the kind of values and priorities. And as Jeff said, Prost is going to be a really excellent opportunity to look at how we're prioritizing and what's going where and how we're prioritizing it. And so I think those are really excellent comments to keep including in that as well.
I'll jump on that with my support from the perspective of prioritization around Pad 4, in light of the fact that we've had a couple of years now of discussion in regards to the opportunity and the timeline, the target timeline out there, whatever that may be specific to Pad 4. So I would also convey a strong desire that if we're going to move on Pad 1, if there's feasibility opportunity to simultaneously move on Pad 2, there's certainly a value add as indicated here.
So Lucy, I'm curious, are we able to add language, since we're specifically voting on the widening of the road, are we able to add language on putting in speed bumps, basically?
So we drafted some language. Mike's gonna, we didn't bring printed copies of the motion. He's gonna add that, a draft for the commission to review.
Okay.
And then you can edit it, as you think is appropriate.
I don't mean to beat it to death, but I've got one comment on that. Speed bumps, raised crosswalks, there's only one that I've ever seen in Issaquah that really does the job. It's so obnoxious that you cannot speed through it, and that's at the high school. That's I don't know if you've driven back towards the back, you cannot help but slow down for that thing. It'll ruin your car if you don't.
So we probably won't be putting ruin the car speed bumps in.
It's too bad.
But what I will say is, so I don't know technically that this is true, but I'm fairly confident that the standard for speed bumps that Public Works Engineering has allows about a 15 to 20 mile speed, and I feel pretty confident. I live on a greenway in Seattle, and they added those 1 to 2 a block, and I drive it every morning, and you really can't go over them. And we were a shortcut. Our street was a shortcut, and so they added those, and they've been very effective in slowing down. And I think, we're always trying to hit the sweet spot between slowing the cars down.
Ruining them?
No, I am not a part of ruin the car, but slowing the cars down, allowing emergency services to get through at a reasonable speed, and also not in thwarting people to the extent that they then speed in between speed bumps, which you also see. So trying to hit the sweet spot between all three of those.
What do you have, Mike?
I'm not trying to move us forward here. I just want to get this language onto the motion for when we get to that point.
Let's see it. Oh, you're typing it, okay.
Oh, agile.
Yeah, we've started using the typing, because then we also have it saved as a
That's good.
draft.
Anybody else?
We don't have the momentary pause of, what does that say?
Yes, yeah, exactly. Reading our scratchy writing.
After hearing Joy, I'm wondering if maybe I should add stroller parking to my motorcycle parking mantra every meeting. But I love that idea.
Well, I think it's important that we think about how we're using our space, and it's great to say, hey, we're gonna have a lot of sports fields. We have this need in our community, but the community is larger than this one need. And then when you start thinking about, well, who's coming to it? And frankly, it's highly likely that you're toting your whole family with you. You're making a whole experience, because every Tuesday and Thursday you've got soccer practice, and weekends it just gets crazy. I know down at the Preston Fields, I mean, it's I think an underutilized space, just because they don't have the space to be able to have play areas and a way for people to be involved in moving together. And I really like this about this plan, is that we're able to really come together and have an opportunity to be interacting better together.
I agree with that, but I also think that the play fields, I mean, this is the place for play fields. We have a lot of passive spaces, and we need to keep those and continue to expand them where we can. But I also think the people who use these play fields are of all kinds of ilk, too. So all ages and groups, organized, unorganized, that sort of thing. So I think it does cover a lot of folks.
Yeah, so having those picnic spaces, having these play areas along with them makes a big difference in how we use them.
I do have one question I meant to ask, and I forgot while Mike's working on
You've
that.
used up your quota.
Have you used up my quota? I've been building up for 3 months now. Since, well, let's see, how do I word this? I don't see anything in here for potential concessions or tickets or anything. Obviously, we can't really do ticketing for anything necessarily, but are there has there been any discussion about facilities for concessions or other activities such as that?
No, there hasn't been.
Did anybody bring it up during any of your discussions?
There's an old concession building down at Tibbetts Valley Park that hasn't been utilized or functioning for many a moon. And it was never brought up from our sports fields or others, other user groups, or during any of the public meetings as a need or a desire for the park.
Okay. Far be it for me to say it's important then. Okay. Mike, what do you have for us? Is it there?
So it says, traffic calming such as fog lines, speed bumps, raised crosswalks, etc. shall be incorporated into the section of Central Park Lane Northeast that is being widened to accommodate on-street parking in order to slow traffic speeds and improve pedestrian safety.
Do we want to add an additional such as and include the indicator element for a crossing from the perspective of for consideration?
Doug, do you know the technical name for those? Rapid
R,
flashing
R,
beacon?
why don't you just put RRFB? It's a pretty standard.
RRFB?
That's a traffic safety, that's not traffic calming, so you might want to treat that as a separate condition.
So I think that would, are you comfortable, Scott, with that falling under the et cetera? Or do you want that specifically listed?
What's the, well, I think it, personally, I think it should be in addition to, in light of the fact of the juncture point to, is it pad 4? Right?
Well,
That particular crosswalk in question?
yeah, but what Doug is saying is there's a difference between traffic safety and traffic calming.
Yes.
Correct? So perhaps a second condition
I'm with you on that, yes. So I'm
refers
saying
to, one refers to traffic calming, the other refers to traffic safety?
pedestrian safety.
Pedestrian safety, sorry.
So here's the thing, what I don't know, so every intersection does not have those.
I mean, not every intersection has those. Is that what you mean?
Jeff Walker will be providing translation service.
Is that what, I mean, is that what you're trying to say?
Yeah, so
Not-
there are a lot of intersections that are not controlled and that don't have those. And the only reason I'm saying that is, you know how stop signs and traffic signals have warrants? What I don't know is if there are specific requirements or indicators for when it is appropriate or not appropriate to use that. So if you're comfortable putting that in as a, urged or encouraged, I think that's great. I'd be happy to get more information about it. I just don't know. And mostly I've been seeing them at either blind intersections or with roundabouts where you're having
I think
multiple lanes.
encouraged or recommended is fine.
Okay.
I think, and the risk that I'm calling out here, again, is once we build out pad 4, I'm assuming I'm saying that correctly, that volume of pedestrian activity crossing that roadway is going to notably increase during big events. And I just see a risk there that there needs to be some element to help mitigate that risk.
Okay.
So I could add a couple things. So we do have a traffic study that one of the elements that's examined is traffic and pedestrian safety. Out of that did not come special rapid flashing beacons or those type of improvements were not recommended. Second, this is kind of a concept design, and this will be reviewed by our Public Works Engineering Department as part of the traffic impact analysis and part of the construction permits. And of course, the city's always taking in pedestrian safety as part of that. And to the extent that it gets analyzed, I think that would be the opportunity where these type of enhanced traffic calming or traffic safety mechanisms are implemented. I'm a little hesitant to start traffic engineering anything in this body because I for one, am not an expert.
Yeah, and I'm not proposing engineering by any means. I'm just calling it out as a risk and recommendation for consideration in the future.
So what if the condition said with something like with the alterations to the College Drive and College Lane intersection for traffic control pedestrian safety measures will also be incorporated, such as an RRFB. Okay, because we don't know exactly what the design of that
Pedestrian
traffic
safety measures.
traffic circle would be, and whether that is the right tool. That's the tool that was identified now. And, you know, while it's disappointing that this isn't all being built out at once, there is some advantage, as we've seen, you know, seeing how things actually function once they're built. And so we may learn things along the way that say traffic circle might not be the best thing. And so, you know, I think what we're identifying and sort of leaving a breadcrumb trail to is the priorities that we're establishing as part of this, rather than the specific solutions. I mean, that's what I'm hearing from you.
Yeah, I agree. Traffic calming and pedestrian safety, I think, are critical, not just now, but as things are being built out. And again, it sounds like I'm harping on it, but is there a place to put in here something around some sort of signage on the east side of the street where the parking is that just indicates, because I don't think there's anything there today that says, you know, that you can only park this direction.
So we can explore that with the police department.
Is that the police department or is that the city?
So I don't know, I'm going to look at Doug, not that he is a traffic engineer, but he plays one on TV. I don't remember seeing an MUCTD sign that fulfills the message that Jeff's identifying. And the reason, there's a standard book of signs.
Yeah,
and so that's why I'm kind of hesitating a little bit, because there are a lot of things that are rules of the road that we don't put signs up for. So that's why.
We should.
And there's a new business for you.
Yeah, that's all I need is another one. I don't know, Doug, do you know if there's anything that says, hey, don't park facing this direction? If you see the sign, you're parked the wrong way. Something like that?
I do not offhand, but there's a variety of different signs that could be used. And as we've been talking about traffic calming, I've got some ideas to, given the nature of the road improvements that are going to be taking place, that may be an opportunity to provide parking on the opposite side of the road, but we need to discuss that internally.
Yeah, and
It could facilitate both the parking in both directions and also act as a traffic calming measure.
Yeah, I'm
as
not
well.
sure I'm a big fan of parking on both sides necessarily just because of people crossing the street. I'm just not a fan of people parking the wrong direction. So I'm kind of thinking those one-way metal things like you see at rental car places. If you drive the wrong way, if you back up, your tires are punctured. Yeah, so don't do that. Anyway, I just want to get it, I think I've said enough. It's on the books. I think people know. That's what we're trying to do.
I had one question on that. That little mini circle, that doesn't come in until pad 4 comes in, correct?
Right.
Okay.
That was my question. So earlier, it's our assumption that when pad 4 comes into play, the mini circle will be looked at again?
So the traffic study indicates that the necessity for the mini traffic circle,
Roundabout?
not a technical term, comes in with the community building, or when such a use that would generate that traffic demand comes into that space.
Not necessarily. Well, pad 4 could be constructed as something else and no community building there, and we wouldn't see a traffic circle necessarily.
Right, it's based on traffic volume, so whenever the assumptions from the traffic study are reached that create that volume, that's what would warrant the mini traffic circle.
Gotcha.
So I'm a little confused. To help Jeff get cars parked the right direction, when you're coming in here, where do you have an opportunity to turn around so you've got your car pointed the right way?
Right.
So there's a, I can show you.
Where's
or
the round?
Jen
The
can
roundabout that's
show us.
already there,
There's a
not the one
second.
by, okay.
There's a second traffic circle that, well, there's a
Grade that doesn't
current.
show up on that.
So, yeah, all the way, no, that's, go back there.
Oh, there we go.
All the way on the right.
There's
Okay, so you
here.
drive down to there to
And
turn
then
around.
there's another one further up this
Okay.
way here.
Thank you.
So you have several opportunities.
Yeah, I mean, one of the public comment letters or emails, indicated that, and I've seen it a bunch of times too, when people go down to that current circle, that they just cut it, and basically go down the opposite side. That's just another, symptom or reality of just the way people drive around here. And, the signs may or may not be there. They're not good enough, like our no left turns or one ways or no right turn on red. All of our signs in the city are inadequate, in my opinion, on things like that are unusual or different. And this is just another one of those things. So, that's why I'm interested in better signage and enforcement up in this area, along with other areas of the city. But now that we're adding more capacity, we're adding more traffic, we're adding more activity, I think we really need to do that. And, police department isn't here to hear that, but I think it's important to talk about.
Right, so the enforcement piece, I understand, is not really, we can hear the message and we can convey the message. But I do understand that you're observing a problem that's already occurring, and you're concerned that it will be, continue or get worse with these changes. And so I think what we have to do is, what is the tool to try and address that? And luckily, our engineers in the room.
Well, I think also we're largely talking about this increased use, so whether that be with police, whether that be with, EMT services. We talked about the potential for having hundreds of kids up there. It's likely that there might be some increased injuries. So being able to kind of have all of the services that our community provides, being able to be aware of what's going on, being able to properly service this increased need is very important. And it sounds like this is a little bit new for the Parks Department. So being able to include all these entities, I'm not sure how the city wants to address that, whether how that is, but there's a lot of services that could see an increased amount of use. So making sure that they're all on board and able to do it.
So fire did review this packet, the assistant fire marshal. So,
They're aware of it, but as far as when we start having max capacity use on the fields is more what I meant.
Yeah.
They're aware of it from an access and, getting their fire trucks through there, right? So they're saying they won't be impacted by it, but I think what you're talking about is other stuff.
Right, it's the
So-
day-to-day stuff, not the, I understand that.
Yep. Okay. Any other further comments, questions?
I personally like the additions. I personally would like to see it change to be, instead of explored, implemented.
Well, I would say, I was eyeing that as well, explored and considered, explored for consideration. Certainly
How about just
implemented, but again, if
shall
we
be
go with
considered?
implemented, then we're dictating. But I certainly, to your point.
Well, we're not necessarily dictating that something, it could be that they limit the safety mechanisms,
So,
but I just.
I would say, let's say shall be implemented, because you're not saying they have to install the beacons. You're saying we're going to incorporate, or maybe incorporated or implemented. Incorporating pedestrian safety measures seems like a duh. I mean, why wouldn't we be doing that? That seems like one of our basic missions. So I don't have a concern going to
So
incorporated.
it's shall be implemented?
Or shall be incorporated.
Okay.
That's what we have in the sentence above.
Yeah.
There we go. Like it. Good catch. Done.
Great.
Okay. Any further discussion before we get to a vote?
Good thing we didn't have topic B on the.
Yeah. No further discussion? Any comments from you guys? No? Okay. All right, at this time, I will ask if there is anybody, so we're going to go to a vote, and just a reminder that if you're a regular member, so everyone's welcome to vote, but if you're a regular member, your vote will count, the others will be noted. for the alternates. And so at this time, I'm going to ask if somebody wants to read the motion, and then we'll vote after that. And we'll need a second if we want to move forward.
Sure.
All right?
Go for it.
You want me to
Please.
read it off of there?
If you're able.
Okay. Motion for approval, SDPA 16-00001, Central Park Phase 2. I move that the Urban Village Development Commission approve the site development permit amendment for the Central Park Phase 2 improvements. File number SDP 16A-00001, as described and evaluated in the staff report amendment dated November 9th, 2016, with exhibits 1 through 9. Project drawings and reports received, boy, you're going to make me sick here, and reports received September 2nd, 2016, and all subsequent submittals up to November 9, 2016, and subject to the conditions therein and as amended tonight. Condition 1, whatever. Traffic call. What's that?
Actually, there's one thing I want to add.
Okay. Add it now or forever hold your condition.
You have to hold your breath while we're waiting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
People are happy not to hear me talk. New condition 38, traffic calming such as fog lines, speed bumps, raised crosswalks, etc., shall be incorporated into the section of Central Park Lane Northeast that is being widened to accommodate on-street parking in order to slow traffic speeds and improve pedestrian safety. New condition 39, with the alterations to College Drive Northeast and Central Park Lane Northeast intersection, pedestrian safety mechanisms shall be incorporated. And I move that the Urban Village Development Commission direct the Development Services Department to prepare findings of fact and conclusions for review and approval by the Development Commission Chairman, affirming the Development Commission's decisions to approve the Central Park. Do you want to? The Urban Village Development. Okay, I'll read that last paragraph again. And I move that the Urban Village Development Commission direct the Development Services Department to prepare findings of fact and conclusions for review and approval by the Urban Village Development Commission Chairman, affirming the Urban Village Development Commission's decisions to approve the Central Park Phase 2 Improvements Project, file number SDPA 16-00001, subject to the conditions listed in the staff report amendment dated November 9, 2016, with exhibits 1 through 9, project drawings and reports received September 2nd, 2016, and all subsequent submittals up to November 8, 2016, and subject to the conditions therein and as amended tonight.
Before we move on, it says September 9th above, sorry, November 9th and November 8th. There we go.
Yeah.
Get rid of one of those hands.
They really mean it.
Mike fell asleep right there.
No. Can you take
Ah.
out one of the hands?
Yeah, sorry, I couldn't find it.
All right. Going to do that again? No, don't do that again. We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a second. All in favor? Raise your hand. All opposed? The records show that it was unanimous. It passed. So thank you very much on that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So I think we'll be seeing you in 2 weeks.
So our next meeting is in 2 weeks. You will not be seeing me. I will be out of the country. Little legal matter. Just kidding. I'm traveling, so I won't be here. Carl should be back.
Good.
All right. And any new business that we need to discuss or announcements?
Not that I think of.
Okay. Anything from the commission? All right. Thank you for your time and effort. Thanks, everybody, for your comments and all of your work. This meeting is now adjourned at the ripe old time of 9:25. Thank you.